Alright, Kelvin, man. I can't do the Granblue deck profile, so you have to do it. You ready?
Always.
Okay, so why should you want to play Nightrose? So, if you like milling your deck, if you're that kind of guy, and you want to go through your deck really fast, then Granblue is the epitome of mill, or self-mill, at least. Nightrose does it pretty well with the builds that you're playing now. You can kind of go through your deck pretty quickly. So if you like doing that, then play Nightrose. You enjoy using your drop zone as a second hand. So that's like kind of Yu-Gi-Oh-ish. Right now, you know, Nightrose, or Granblue in general, used to just be this really lame kind of look. We're zombies and pirates, and we can kind of get stuff from the drop zone, but that's about it. But Nightrose has evolved to the point where you're starting to, like, G really pushed it, but now, like, V's replicating G, so you're getting to that point where you're kind of using your drop zone as a second hand. You have ways to grab cards from the drop zone. You have revival effects from the drop zone that actually matter. So if you like that kind of style, then Nightrose is really pushing it. You enjoy having consistency in standard because your drop zone is a second hand. You do have more consistency, and you have cards that grab stuff. Means it's like Angel Feather, right? Angel Feather has a damage zone as a second hand, but you have a drop zone, and that drop zone is way bigger, doing way more things for you. So that adds to your consistency in the game. If you like pirates, then yeah, sure. If you like ghosties as well, like Boo, like from like Mario's and stuff, if you like that, then Granblue is for you. But I don't think ghosties have that much support, at least not in standard. Nightrose is more focused on the zombies, the female pirates. So if you like that, then get Nightrose. You also don't like to be stopped by defensive triggers. Now, I know defensive triggers is like the bane of a lot of decks, but Nightrose gets fat and hits multiple times, so you just don't care, right? You see an MLB, he's got 18k defense. That is nothing. It's like child's play, dude. Just smash through that. They get like 2 triggers, dude. My Skull Trigger hits like 70k, so actually just doesn't matter. So hits big, hits fast, hits multi-attack. So if you like that, then perfect deck, right? Consistent, plays the drop zone. Hits big, so yeah, it's everything in this one package. Okay, so I'm gonna pass this on to Kelvin, and he's gonna show you the deck that he's been playing with right now. So let's swap over to him.
Hi guys, it's Kelvin from WCC, and today we've got a Granblue deck profile, and this time it's my all-time favorite Nightrose deck. It's a standard deck, so let's just go with it. Starting with Grade 3. It's a Nightrose deck, so a no-brainer. You pick 4 Nightrose. And with her effect, all your rear guards get 5k power when boosting or attacking, but they get retired at the end of the battle. So you gotta keep that in mind, and the deck list will pretty much complement that sort of play style. Also, on attack, it gets a counter +1, call 2 cards in the same column skill, which makes it really good for multi-attacking, and you can amplify this effect if you have 2 counter blasts in a turn. Moving on, we have the Skull Dragons. If you are unfamiliar with Granblue, this card cannot be normal called, but it gets 2000 power for each card in your drop zone, so it can get really big really fast. And the idea is you want to finish your opponent with as many Skull Dragon attacks as you can. Then we have the Grade 2s. The MVP of the new set, we have Pirate Swordsman Columbard. So with the skill is counter +1, you can mill any card of your choice, and you can call any card of your choice. Works as Vanguard and Rearguard. So this card is a godsend. Being able to choose any mill on your second turn is really powerful, and it just opens up your play really early. It also lets you multi-attack if you call it with Nightrose in the battle phase, but it's got a hard once per turn restriction, so you gotta keep that in mind. So we have next, still a very good card in Granblue, Great Shades. So, for the cost of discarding 1, you can mill 2 and salvage any card of your choice except for another Great Shade. It's really powerful in a way that it lets you hand fix, it lets you salvage any card of your choice, early game, mid game, late game, anytime. It's just so powerful. And it gets 5,000 power if you have 10 cards, 10 or more cards in the drop zone. So with Nightrose it hits 19 by itself. It's quite respectable. And then we have the other grade 2s. Stormride Ghost Ship. With Nightrose, since all your rear guards get retired after attacking anyways, you really want to have a way to not neg yourself too much, and Ghost Ship is the perfect card for that slot. It cannot be normal Colt, similar to Skull Dragon, but the deck has a lot of ways to get him on the board. And it gets 15,000 power when attacking, making it 24 by itself, plus another 5 from Nightrose, so hits 29,000, hits everything. And you retire itself and draw a card. So if you don't have enough cards in the bin for Skull Dragons, this is your go-to attacker. You want to attack with as many Ghost Ships as you can and just attack with big power while keeping your hand count. And the last card in your grade 2 slot, we have Captain Night Mist. Now, from the effect, you might question why you need another one of him in the deck. Well, you already have Colombard, but we'll get to that in the later section of the video. Its effect is Counterblast 1. You get to call a card of your choice. At first you can only call grade 1, but in the later game you can call anything. But we'll get to that in a bit. Now we have grade 1s. The first 4 copy that I choose is Dancing Cutlass. As I mentioned before, we want to have 2 Counterblast plays during Nightrose turns, and this card really helps you achieve that. If you have 2 copies of it in the bin, you can mill the top of your deck, and you can bind 1 copy, and you get to call 1 Dancing Cutlass for free, and you countercharge 1. So what it does is it gives you 1 free unit and a 1 countercharge, which is both really good in Nightrose. And from playing with it, this card belongs behind your Vanguard. Nightrose by itself hits 22, which is okay. But if you call Cutlass behind it and boost with it, that makes Nightrose hit 33, which hits like any deck, like MLB, any Forced Clans. It just hits that magic 33k number. They can't just throw 2 15ks and hope for 2 to pass. So Cutlass, put it behind your Vanguard, guys. The next 4 copy that we have is the Nigger Bones. Now, this card is quite unique that it has a drop zone effect, meaning as long as it's in the drop zone, you can activate it. You can mill it, you can use it to guard, you never play it from hand for obvious reasons. And for the cost of discarding 1 and putting the Nigger Bone to the bottom deck, you get to call a grade 1 card, but if you have 10 or more cards in the drop zone, you get to call anything. So basically you want to use Nigger Bone to call all your hard to get cards, like your Skull Dragons, your Ghost Ships. This is your way of calling your really big cards, and you really want 4 copies. You just can't cut it out, and we get more to Nigger Bone in the combo section. Then we have Tommy the Ghosty Brothers. It's your standard grade 3 searcher, checks top 5, gets a grade 3, and discards 1 if you do get 1. Now, I actually really want to put 4 copies of this in the deck, but Granblue always has slight deck slot issues, so I think 3 copies workable. You really need it to get your Nightrose to ride. You want multiple Nightroses obviously to re-ride, and you also want to use it to mill your Skull Dragons. And the discard utility is quite nice because sometimes you have a bunch of dead cards in your hand, like Skull Dragons, Ghost Ships, your Dancing Cutlass, if you want to proc it, Nigger Bones. The discarding is actually a really big part of this deck. And also gets 5k power if you have 5 or more cards in the drop zone. So, surprisingly, this is actually like the 4th biggest card in your deck, funnily enough. But yeah, 3 copies just because it's really hard to fit in the slot. And then we have 2 copies of Ripple Banshee. Similar to Ghosties, I really want to put more of this card in the deck, but I think 2 is workable. You just need to see one of them in the drop zone. So when it's called from the drop zone, you get to Soul Blast 1, draw a card, and it gets 4k power for the turn, so it hits 12. Again, it's there to mitigate the fact that you lose every Reguts every time you attack with Nightrose. So drawing cards when it's called from the bin is quite useful. If you use the Nightrose effect, this is your go-to back row unit. So Banshee, always needed the bin. Last slot of the Great One in the deck, we have Skeleton Sea Navigator. Now, this card is just really good. For the cost of tapping 2 Rearguards, you can tap itself, get to mill 5 cards. Granblue still has this issue of bricking early game if you can't get anything in the bin. So this really speeds up that process. You can play more copies of it, but I think if you get to right Columbard, you can mill this and just call this anyway. And that way, that's your setup turn. It gets your 5 or 10 drop zone count really fast. It gets your Cutlasses in the bin. It gets your Banshees, Ghost Ships, anything. It just speeds up your early game and makes your early Nightrose turns really aggressive. So 2 copies, I consider playing 1, I consider playing 3, but I think 2 is the sensible choice here. But let me know your thoughts. I think 2 is okay for now. So that's all the normal units, and then we have the trigger lineup. The trigger for Granblue is quite easy, really. You have 4 heal triggers, and with heal triggers you actually really want to be careful with what you counterblast in Granblue. Reason being, if you heal trigger, you get that card in the drop zone. So if your Skull Dragons or Nigger Bones get stuck in damage or Cutlass, make sure you heal them off. Counterblast with them first and heal them off when you can. And then you have 4 critical triggers. Banshee, 4 more critical triggers. Can be anything that you want. And the last slot for Sentinels, you get the option between draw triggers or crit triggers. I still think with Nightrose you go exclusively Protect 1, just because the you don't get the intercept value because you lose all your units after attacking. So Protect 1 is your go-to, meaning the value of playing draw Sentinels is a bit lacking, and also sometimes you draw to your deck a bit too fast. And with that, I choose 4 copies of Rampage Shade. Having a 30k shield is also really useful. Just most of the time it's enough to guard the big attacks. And if you really need to guard anything over 30k, you can use your Protect 1. Also, being a single card 30k, it's your go-to salvage target with Grid Shade. So it's just has a nice synergy with the salvaging section of the deck. Also, with 12 crits, you can be really aggressive in the early game. You swing multiple attacks, you flip crits, you put your crits on your big attacks after Nightrose calls them. And endgame, you can easily finish people off from 4 damage with your Skull Dragon attacks with crit triggers. 12 crit just really helps the deck. And then you have the 1 copy starter, Grenache. No counter charge too. Right, let's move on to the next section.
So why don't you run 4 copies of Navigator in your deck because it's really popular now. Everyone's going max Navigator. Why not replace Tommy's with Navigator?
The deck relies so heavily on riding Nightrose. If you don't ride Nightrose, you just lose. So getting that consistency of riding the right grade 3, I think is more important. Some people say, you can just run 4 of these and you can salvage your Nightrose with Greed Shade anyways. Yes, that's correct, but you only have 2 turns to do that. And sometimes bumping the Navigator to 4 is still not enough because you need to mill a Nightrose, a Niggerbone, and also a Greed Shade on turn 2. So, and you have to commit a lot of hand to tap 4 rear guards. So if you do that, you probably lose the game anyways. Your opponent will just go whack face, and yeah.
Alright, so we had a look at the deck. Let's talk about some strengths and weaknesses of Nightrose. So strengths. Big multi-attacks that cannot be stopped by defensive triggers. Yes, right? 70k Skull Dragon, 72k Skull Dragon, 33k Vanguard column, right? These things just get bigger and bigger. So, great power, great responsibility. Alright, uses the drop zone as a second hand. So again, consistent. You basically use effects from the drop zone, get whatever you want. What do you want? Salvage it with Greed Shade, etc, etc. Your hand quality thus becomes really strong because you can filter the bad cards in your hand to the good cards in your drop zone. So you see, this is a 5k defensive power. Let's swap it for a 30k Sentinel or a 20k heal trigger, right? Your hand quality becomes very strong, and you can get cards that you want to play like now or next turn, right? And then lastly, you can end the turn with nothing on the field. Now, that might sound like a bad idea, because that means you're losing cards, right? Nightrose's effect, it kills your own cards, but that can actually be advantageous against certain matchups, like Narukami, they want to bind things to trigger their effects. Sorry, dude, nothing on the field for you to bind. You're playing against Gridora? Dude, sorry, no Cradle for you to do, because everything's just done, right? So that can be advantageous in certain matchups and be good, right? It's just good. So some weaknesses, though. So your cards get retired after... Hang on, dude. You just said that was an advantage, but that can also be bad because you lose the cards against matchups where you might not care about leaving cards on the field. You have to be careful with what you attack with, right? Because they die. If they attack or boost, they die. So after they die, you have to spend cards in hand to kind of recover them or play something down, right? So you have to be careful with how you attack and how you boost. And because although like cards disappear, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. Your game quality can also be determined by how you mill. So if you mill terribly, then your game could just be absolutely terrible. If you mill like all the triggers in the bin and there's nothing really good to get back, then well, you're not having a good game. Likewise, if you play against something like Nubatama and you have like specific cards and you mill like only one of the specific cards, they just bind that with Shiranui, then you're gonna have a bad time. You're gonna have a bad time. And lastly, you don't actually generate that much advantage. This is kind of tied into the first thing I just said. So you have ghost ships and you have banshees that draw, right? But they also die. So they kind of don't generate amazing amounts of advantage. Your hand is not like as explosively big as something like a Dark Irregulars will be. My Dark Irregulars is kind of like a bit of a, like, how do you say it? A bit of a anomaly? It's a bit of an anomaly, yeah? Because you can just draw so many cards, but your hand quality could be strong. It could be just like 30k guards, 20k guards, etc, etc. But if you face against something like an Excel deck, which doesn't really care about the quality of your hand, but more of the quantity of your hand, or certain guard restrictions want you to discard multiple cards, then quality doesn't really matter as much compared to quantity. So that can be an issue. If you lose all those cards in your hand as well, right, due to all these multiple Excel attacks or just guard restrictions, right, then you actually don't have many cards to place down the next turn because they all disappeared the previous turn when they attacked. So sure, Nightrose does generate some cards when it attacks, but that also means if you're doing that, you're not multi-attacking. So you have to really balance how well you play with your hand, how much you use for guarding, because when you guard, you can definitely guard. But again, that card means just one card less for you to place onto the field. So that can be a tough nut to balance, alright? So moving on, we're going to talk about some bread and butter combos that you need to learn as a Nightrose player, and then we'll go through some mulligans as well. So we're going to go back to Kelvin, alright?
Right, so now we'll get to the bread and butter combo of the Nightrose deck. Ideally, you want to have 2 damage face up. And this is how your field will look like most of the time when you ride Nightrose first. And the way you attack will be your rear guards will attack first. So that's going to be hitting for 18 and gets retired. And you'll be hitting with the other row of rear guard, and that will be hitting for 32. And they get retired. Now, when your Vanguard attacks, if they're on grade 2, you'll be hitting for 24. And if they're on grade 3, you'll be hitting for 34. And you'll counterblast 1. The card that you want to call will be back row. You want a Ripple Banshee for the Soul Blast 1 draw 1 effect, and then you want a Columbard. You can activate either of the 2 effects first. Usually I just do Banshee, draw 1, and then I do Columbard. Use my other Cardon Blast, mill 1 card of my choice, put it in the bin, and then you get to call a card, and the go-to is usually your Ghost Ship. You can call Skull Dragon if your opponent's really close to 6 damage, but Ghost Ship hits respectably high and also draws you a card. So if you don't really need to do a kill, I think Ghost Ship is better than Skull Dragon. And you Twin Drive, you put your heal. If you heal, that's great. If you get a crit, you give it to any of these 2. Usually I give it to the Ghost Ship. And with this row, what you can do sometimes if your opponent hits a damage trigger, for example, you can just use the Columbard to attack one of their rear guards, retire it, and you get to keep the Ripple Banshee for a unit next turn. You gotta be careful with Nightrose because you lose everything after you attack or boost, so sometimes keeping them on the field is a nice way to keep your pluses. And then you attack with the Ghost Ship. And you will sustain a decent number of hand if you keep doing that. Alright, and this is how you do a finisher with Nightrose. Basically you want to be doing 4 Skull Dragon attacks. And first you gotta fill your board, so you can use your cutlasses. And then you want to be using your Negro Bones or either of Columbard or Night Mist from your hand. Let's say I just use 2 Negro Bones, so I'll discard 2, put both of these to the bottom of my deck, and call 2 Skull Dragons. So I'll call them here and here. And you'll be attacking with Skull Dragon, it gets retired, Skull Dragon gets retired, and each of these swing for like something like 70,000. Because you should have something like 30 something cards in your drop zone by then. And you'll be attacking with your Vanguard, Counterblast. Now what you want to do is you call Skull Dragon in the front row, and in the back row, do not call a Grade 1. If you haven't used a Columbard this turn, you get to use it, but this is where that 1 copy of Night Mist comes into play. So if you've had to use a Columbard to call your first attack Skull Dragons, you can't use it again for the rest of the turn. That's why you need a Night Mist. And in the back row, the effect still activates, you CB1, and you get to call any card of your choice because you have so many cards in your drop zone now, and you call the other Skull Dragon in the front row. You Twin Drive, you have power and crit to either of these 2. That gets retired, and you swing for game. Right, now I'm gonna talk a bit about the mulligan with this Nightrose deck. There's a few things that you want to keep in mind, especially the grade 2 ride. So, first thing that you see from this hand, for example, you don't have grade 3. You mulligan all the triggers away. With grade 1s, you don't really care what you ride. Tommy will be nice because you get to scry for grade 3. But keeping 1 as a safe ride is nice. I'll just keep the Navigator because it works as a rearguard as well. with the Greed Shade, it's nice to have, but the problem is now you don't have a Columbard. And not having Columbard makes your early game kind of tricky, so honestly just throw it away and hope you get a Columbard. Otherwise, you get another grade 2 and you don't really care. So let's try doing that. It's bottom deck. And that's still fine. You don't get a Columbard, but at least you tried. And you also want to fetch more cards like Tommy and obviously get your Nightrose right. Keeping the Grid Trade is fine, but it doesn't work as a Vanguard. You gotta remember about that. So it doesn't hold as much value unless you already have another grade 2 to ride. Let's try another Mulligan. Oh, this time this is like perfect hand. Now, if you've got Tommy and Columbard, it's really good to keep Grid Shade. So just mull these two away. That's really good to get another Tommy, so let's just shuffle. And let's just see what happens when you go first. You draw one, you ride, you draw one, check top 5. Hit, nothing, that's fine, let's just shuffle. Let's just do another Tommy. Perfect, so now we've got our Nightrose. And this card 1. This is actually pretty useless because you've got 20 and 30k shields. In your turn you get hit for 1 damage, your turn again draw 1. And this is where it gets quite nice. So you write your Columbard, counter plus 1. What you want to get is your Navigator to help your early game setup. You can call it behind the Vanguard, you can call it here. I like to call it here just because I like reserving this slot for my Cutlass. Tap 2, mill 5. It's pretty unfortunate mills, that's 3 crits gone, but that's fine. You can play the Grid Shade down and go for a more aggressive turn, but you might get damage denied, so I usually just keep it in my hand, just attack with it. And then when it's their turn, they hit me for 1 or whatever. And now you have the really nice Nightrose turn. You get a protect 1. You can move this up. This actually hits pretty decently big now. You can use that to salvage your 30k shields. Actually would like to see more cards like Rippled Banshee or the Ghost Ship, so let's try milling more. Let's do this. I just wanna clean out the deck from any grade 3s. That's really nice. I can rewrite that next turn. Discard 1, 15k is useless. Let's tap these 2. Nice. Let's just attack with that, because that's actually still hitting for 19 and 18. And when your Vanguard swings, you can call your Ghost Ship. Now, there's no Rippled Banshee in here, so it's arguable if you want to be calling that, because that's really hitting quite big. It's also quite nice to just call something that you want to use next turn, for example, or even that. Either one of these, I think they're decent. Let's just do that, and you get to... hand's really good, but let's just mill more. Oh, that was unfortunate. Let's get another 30k shield just because we can. You need Twin Drive, Power Crit. Still get double trigger anyways. Remember, you wanna heal. You gotta be careful with what you heal. So heal that. That's still big. Hits them for 39. This card is like just insane. Draw 1. And that's a really nice hand, and you have all the setup you need for your next turn. So yeah, that's it for a quick early game from Nightrose.